Hello, Spark fans. Welcome back to Advancing Spark, where we're having a news day. Now, it's been a little while since we had a news day because, well, in June we had the Data AI Summit, and that was just all of the news all at once. So I didn't really bother doing a bit of a recap of the platform release notes. But I've been going through, and there's a few things that snuck through that weren't big keynote headlines. And obviously, there's a recap of all the keynote headlines. So, usual story, today we're going to take a step through the platform release notes, talk about what's new, talk about what bits I love, talk about what bits I don't really care about, or we won't talk about those, but and yeah, that's the plan. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're new around here, but otherwise, let's just dive into it, eh? So, I've got the Azure flavor of the Databricks release notes. Again, use the one that's right for your cloud provider. You can get the AWS or GCP ones. We've got August, June, and July. I won't do August. We'll do that at the end of August. Kind of makes sense. But let's start with the June release notes right down the bottom, and we'll whip through what's going on here. So, what has happened in the world of Databricks? Well, one, you've now got a nice schema browser that's baked into your notebooks. I'm gonna start opening Databricks up in the side so we can take a peek at some of these things. But you might notice now while you're writing a notebook, you have a little icon. You can look at the Data Explorer and you can reference that while you're doing your work, which just makes life a lot easier. We saw it again when we were looking at the Databricks Assistant recently. It's the same thing. It's just baked into your workspace. You can grab something. Let's just grab a little sure, little demo workspace. You've now got this little Data Explorer, so you can go and have a look at the data that's in University Catalog or whatever. Oh. Don't have a cluster turned on, so it's not happy. Nothing's happy because my cluster's not turned on. But you get the idea. You can see what's going on whilst you're in a notebook now. We've got runtime 13.1. We talked about that in the last news a long time ago now. There's some new Databricks Marketplace providers. We've seen a huge focus on Databricks Marketplace. There's loads of other news in here about the Marketplace. That is that place you can go and grab, either free to the public or make a private relationship. Say, yes, please, I'd like that data. Click a button and it appears in your Unity catalog ready to go, and people can just start using it, which is great. So again, seeing more data providers going on there, it's just great. The richer that ecosystem, the more useful it is. So all good. Some Terraform updates. Start to see things around some multi-threading and volumes. Databricks volumes, interesting. We'll hear about that in a second. Databricks Connect V2. We talked about that. I did a little video a month or so ago looking at the new Visual Studio extension and how all that works. It's powered by Databricks Connect V2, which is powered by Spark Connect. So yeah, super useful. That's now GA. You can start using it in anger. It's great. More marketplace things, allowing people to register themselves and create their own profiles, which is great. You can now uninstall things that you've installed via the marketplace. It's useful. Otherwise, you have to kind of delete it and back things out. So being able to go away to the data you've been playing with is useful. And again, private exchanges. So if someone enables you, so if you've talked to someone, they've invoiced you, said, yes, I'll pay for this, they can then enable you through the marketplace and you can go and grab there. It's a private listing. So again, just making it easier for people to do business and monetize their data via the marketplace is great. Little thing saying if you've been removed as a Databricks user and then you're reinstated, you no longer get just a blank folder and have to start from scratch. You're going to be added. You have your old home folder as a backup. Interesting. I've not dug into the details of how long it takes, what's the retention period, how much data you can have in there, all that stuff, but still super useful, especially for short-term things. Service principals are now actually in the UI. You no longer have to go the back route to use the API or CLIs to plug things in via a service principal. You can now manage them through the UI, like any other user, like any other group. Isn't it nice? It's only taken let's say 7-8 years to get here, where the primary way of authenticating in Azure is now available through the UI in Databricks. So, you know, cool. You can run jobs as a service principal again, so plugging it in, making that all better. Again, stuff we needed to be able to do for ages. The moment you talk about run as a user, that user should be able to be either a managed identity or a service principal. It has to be to allow things to run as a system account. System accounts are older than me. Needs to be in there somewhere. Okay, Databricks Terraform provider, again, getting some more stuff. Again, if you're looking at the Terraform stuff, just go to the release notes for the changelog itself. It's got all of the different things in there. repos have moved into the workspace. Now, you might have seen this. So if we go and have a look over here, when we're having a look at our workspace itself, you've now got this repos underneath. You used to have a separate thing over here saying repos, and if you're looking and going, where's my repos? They're now just part and parcel of your workspace. So you can treat something that's in your repo the same as if it was in your workspace. That's the whole idea. That's the whole point. They're getting closer and closer and going, doesn't really matter whether it's in a repo or your workspace, treat it the same, therefore go to the same place, which is cool. Listing jobs can now do pagination. It works better when doing pagination. So if you have tons of jobs and you're trying to automate that and scrape that and build a little ETL workflow kind of thing, that's going to be easier to do, which is good. There's a new CLI, a major overhaul of the Databricks CLI. Now you can grab that, and it's got, again, much more of the REST API entire kind of estates is now supported through this new CLI. Be careful about versions. If you're doing certain things, maybe the new CLI won't be compatible with it. Maybe it will be. Just make sure you test the things that you have. If you have a load of jobs built currently in your DevOps pipelines, and you're using the Databricks CLI as part of that, just have a quick check before you upgrade it to make sure it actually supports everything that you're doing. But again, we're going to be seeing people moving over to it, doing more and more with it. There's lots of stuff you can do in there, which is cool. The jobs UI has gotten better, so they've changed how you see that completed jobs. And again, it just gets better and better, that whole matrix of what succeeded, what failed. So yeah, just generally better. This is a big one. So serverless SQL workhouses work with backend Azure private link enabled. So private link is essentially saying, I don't want this website, my whole, when I connect into my Databricks workspace, that website, I don't want that to be public. I don't want any old IP address to be able to get through to it. I want people to have to go through my private network, go to a private IP address to be able to actually connect to that specific website. Slowly, we be getting to the point where we can enable that. And there's two different sides. There's the users connecting into the control plane, essentially the UI, and then there's the UI connecting into my Azure and being able to talk to the clusters and things that have been put up in there. You know, private link turned on both sides. Again, this backend private link is about how the control plane talks to my data plane, and it didn't work with serverless. You couldn't have serverless turned on. Now it does get turned on. Now I've not dug into this statement of it works, but it doesn't use it. But there is a separate idea about how serverless talks to the data plane anyway. So if it's still going through a secure plane, it just doesn't use your own custom secure plane. Fine. But yes, that is now a thing. That was a blocker. That's no longer a blocker as of back in June. You can enable custom managed keys without having to use Devlo, which is useful. The Visual Studio Code extension we looked at in the past video is now GA, which is great. We'll talk about Databricks runtimes in a little bit. And we saw the GA of Marketplace as we went into the Data AI Summit, which is great. Models, we've not talked about this. So being able to put a machine learning model into Unity Catalog and control it the same as any other Unity Catalog object. So if you want to grant permissions to use a certain thing inside Unity Catalog, that is now extends to machine learning models. The interesting statement here is Databricks recommends using that instead of the existing model registry. That's going to be deprecated. So if you're currently doing lots and lots of MLflow and you're registering loads of models into the MLflow registry and you're using that as your permissions model, be a little careful, because this is essentially saying this is going to be deprecated in the future. No idea when. Don't know yet. But UC is kind of taking over, which makes sense. We don't want to have data scientists, you keep your data over there. Engineers, you keep your data over there. Analysts, your SQL stuff goes over there. You want a single plane of data governance, data cataloging, data dictionarying, security management. So makes entire sense. Just heads up, if you are doing lots of ML inside of Databricks, you want to be thinking about when you're going to move over to using UC to do it. It's still in public preview, so don't worry about that too much yet. System tables. Did a video about that recently about Lakehouse observability. So this ability for you to kind of query some backend tables inside Unity Catalog, UC only, and pull out things like which users access which notebooks and which tables, what queries they ran, how much money you're spending across all of your workspaces. So much information in there. Do go have a look at that. That is now something you can play with. Then a bunch around this, the Databricks SDK. So there is now this like development kit, so you can go and essentially build out and automate a lot of your Databricks workflows and provisioning and all of that stuff over and above the Databricks CLI. Databricks CLI, nice. You can send commands to it. It's basically a wrap around the API. This is much more like a programming interface that you can build actual applications into it and have it actually interact and build on Databricks itself while you're going through. So you've got Go, you've got Python, you've got a few different versions of it. Now that's going to be super, super interesting. We're going to do a video about that very soon. And we're digging about what you can use it for and how you should use it and how you position it in your head against the CLI, against the API, and what you use for what. And against Terraform, realistically. So yeah, loads of interesting stuff in there. Oh, cool. So that was a fairly quick whip through loads of stuff happening in June, plus all of the other stuff that happened in the Data AI Summit. Now we switch over to July. We're going to go straight through. Might as well double up. We've got a few more things. So number one, init scripts in DBFS. So if you're using initiation scripts for your Spark clusters and you're storing it just as a bit of script file in DBFS, that's going to get turned off, which makes entire sense. It should not live in DBFS. DBFS is a bad place to put anything. So having it as part of your workspace makes entire sense. Do that at the very least, if that's what you're doing. The ability to share views via Delta sharing and Databricks Marketplace. Again, super idea, and allows you to be a little bit more flexible and to create abstraction layers and even do things like data masking and that kind of stuff you can do inside of a view, and then you can share that view via Delta sharing rather than have to make a separate copy of your data. So yeah, interesting stuff in terms of being able to do that, just making that richer, more functional. Really good. GA's gone, also 13.2 is GA. We'll also see 13.3 coming in beta. We'll have a look at both of those. Again, kind of being able to, how far back can you go when using the jobs API? They're going to just some changes around that. You might get caught out of that if you're actually sort of using that. So be a little careful. If you're just trying to get back everything, it's no longer going to give you everything. More updates to Terraform provider. Again, go and have a look at that. Functions in Data Explorer. So this is new. So if you have a SQL function or a Python UDF, and you've registered that with the SQL side of things, you can now actually see that inside of Data Explorer, and then give permissions to it, and you can use it as essentially as part of things. So that is super interesting. I hadn't actually seen that, but that is really, really useful. Just a body data model, the same as if you were browsing a SQL server and you'd look and you'd see all my tables, I'd see all my views, I'd see all my stored procs, and I'd see all of my functions that have been made. You can now do the same. So really, really good. Just helps. We've got updates for the extension. We're going to see that now regularly, the VS Code extension being kept up to date, which is good. You can now submit feedback and bugs and say what you're happy with straight through the workspace. So if there's anything you don't like and you want to feed that back to Databricks, you go nuts and tell them what you think. Again, don't tell me. I don't work for Databricks. Tell them. It's fine. Unity Catalog volumes. So again, another one we did a video about, I think just last week. This is where if you want to have just a folder of just various different files that aren't necessarily in a tabular structure, but you still want that governed and you want to manage lineage through Unity Catalog, you can now add this thing called a volume. Very similar to how we used to mount lakes into our workspace. You can mount a volume into Unity Catalog. Main thing is you shouldn't be trying to then register tables in UC on top of that volume. They should be separate. So if you've got like a landing area of unstructured data before you get it into your lake, add it as a volume and you get full lineage and security and all that good stuff. Just don't add your entire lake as a volume and then try and create Unity Catalog tables on it. It won't work. So volumes, unstructured data before you put it into a table. Okay, so improvements to stop people actually hacking into your Databricks workspace, which is good, and they're now turned on by default, which is good. Again, generally you want your Databricks environment to be secure. It's kind of how it works. Workspace admins can now see each other's or see other users' trash directories. There used to be a bit of a gap where essentially as a user, I could put something into trash, and then if that user then left, no one could get that thing back. That was then dead to everybody, and there's no way of going, actually, can we just get it back from the trash? If I was leaving a company and I was annoyed, I could just trash my entire workload, and then nobody could get it. Admins can now go into other users' trash directories and actually retrieve those things before it's too late. Makes sense. Another thing that just makes sense, so the account level skim, so that is when the SDIM is when you can say, well, Active Directory, I want you to sync users, and every time a new user is added to this AD group, add them into my Databricks group and push them to Unity Catalog and do all that good stuff. It didn't remove them, so it didn't take them away when they were deactivated. So that's probably good. Well, essentially, it did remove them, but it deleted them rather than deactivating them. So it's now just a little bit cleaner. So you can deactivate and deactivate on the other side, delete and delete on the other side, rather than just a wholesale delete the user. You can deactivate and deactivate service principals. So in order to allow that, they've now introduced the idea of deactivating users as opposed to blanket deleting them. So you can see which are your active users, which are your deactivated users, purely to make it work the same way that AD works, just so we can have those things plugged in. Again, calling it AD, it's now Microsoft Entra, but no one's calling it that yet. We'll see. Databricks Assistant, we saw that in the last video I did, I think last week. That is the new ChatGPT OpenAI powered assistant that will write code for you. It'll look at errors for you. It'll answer questions for you. Again, it's not Lakehouse IQ enabled yet. It is using just the generic open ChatGPT. But yeah, super useful, really, really interesting, really, really great direction it's going. Doesn't always write the best code yet, but as a first step, it's pretty cool. Again, the SDKs are going to be updated. We're going to see a lot of those in terms of kind of the updates for the Python and the Go SDKs just generally being updated as various different libraries get introduced and new features get introduced. All makes sense. Again, more things. You can now create an alert if a job has been running for too long, which is just so useful. If something's been running for longer than an amount of time, it used to be well, I'd have to set a timeout and actually stop the thing. So this should only run for 10 minutes. I'm going to set a timeout of an hour, and if it got to an hour, it would just kill that job. Well, maybe I wanted an email to say, hey, look, it's been running for an hour, you should probably take a look at it. But we're not going to cancel it, because maybe it's right. Maybe it's okay that it's been running for an hour. But being able to do that and just have an alert that doesn't kill the job, super useful. So that is now something that you can do, which is good. You can now move things from the repo to trash. That's fine. And Lakehouse Federation, we've not done a video about this yet. This is one of the other big Unity Catalog announcements that we saw. And that is when we're going to plug into things that are not inside Databricks. So if you have things in like Snowflake or a SQL database or various different sources, you can plug that in and register those sources with Unity Catalog and then run a query over them. I've got a quick list of things. There we go. So the first step, beginning MySQL, Postgres, Redshift, Snowflake, Microsoft SQL Server, Azure SQL Data Warehouse. I assume that's the Synapse dedicated SQL pool, or it's the old school data warehouse, who knows? And other Databricks in other people's accounts. So you can now do that, add in all these different sources. So if someone had Microsoft SQL Server and your Databricks workspace had access, you need network access to that thing, it's not magic. You can then register a load of tables in there, and people can just write queries from it. You could have your ETL go inside a Databricks notebook saying, we'll select this table from this Microsoft SQL Server, write it down into a Delta table without needing to treat it like a completely external source. You can have that lineage inside of Unity Catalog. So that's new. Really, really cool idea. Lots of good push down, make it fast when we're doing those queries. Lots of stuff in there. It's all new. So we'll see how that will work. We'll be doing a video on that soon. Some changes, some shortcuts that you can use if you want to turn on the old ones. Everyone can access things that you install inside Marketplace, which makes sense. Again, you've got various different abilities to turn that on, so you can enable who actually controls it, a bit more maturity around how it works, a bit more security about how it works. A funny one in terms of, so one of the things that we do fairly regularly whenever working with financial services, any company that wants to network their data up, which weirdly is most companies that we work with, you have things like secure cluster connectivity. Now, when you turn on a cluster, it's made of a load of VMs. Each VM has a public IP address and a private IP address. Now, when you secure everything up, you kind of want to remove those public IP addresses. And that's what secure cluster connectivity does. It just disables public IP on those various different boxes that are a part of your cluster. Now, previously, you had to turn that on when you're programmatically deploying a Databricks workspace. It wasn't a thing that you could do, like, once it's already there. Now, you can do that. Now, as part of creating your workspace, part of updating your workspace, you can now actually enable private link and secure cluster connectivity. You can do things securely, even if you're doing things through the UI. You don't have to go, oh no, but I want it to be secure. That means I have to build my own ARM templates. That means I have to do Terraform. You can, through the UI, build a secure architecture now, which makes sense. Running jobs through jobs. It's always an interesting thing in Orchestrator. So now if you have a Databricks job and that's doing a load of tasks, one of those tasks can be kick off that job. Now that is a great usage pattern in any types of Orchestrator because it means we can have generic runs. So this does something generic, and then I've got various different parent jobs which call my generic job to do the same activity at the end of the thing and pass some parameters in if I can. So yeah, really, really useful. Just basically making just that workflow, breaking it up into individually testable parts rather than just one gigantic monolithic schedule makes so much sense. So that is a great, great, great thing to see. I'll be able to look at that in a little bit. Lots and lots of SDK updates. We're going to be seeing lots and lots of those things coming through. Giving people the ability to manage groups without giving them full admin access makes sense. So if you have various different support people and they are managing privileges of who's in those different groups, you can give them that special role now of being a group manager as opposed to having to be the full admin of everything, which makes sense. And finally, you can now create full AD group push into Unity from your workspaces as opposed to just always being local. So essentially, it creates the group at the account, your Databricks account, as opposed to in each workspace. And that makes sense. Just allowing your workspace admins to do that rather than have to be give that to the Metastore admin, which is a huge amount of privilege. All right. Oh, that took a while. So, 2 months worth of updates. Loads and loads and loads of things in there. Few big ticket features that we've not covered yet. Some things that are going to be in upcoming videos. Other things that are small, nice quality of life, UI changes. Some nice things that we have seen go in. So, been two whole runtimes released since we last ran through it. So 13.2, got a few things in there. We're going to run through very, very quickly. Checkpointing for RocksDB has actually gotten a lot better. So you can enable that and that'll just make each checkpoint syncing faster. So they recommend doing it for everything. So if you do currently have stateful queries in your structured streaming, meaning you're looking at various things such as like the moment in time style queries, aggregates over time windows, those things that need to understand state, then enabling that should make things just faster in order to checkpoint. And asynchronous checkpointing just means it's not going to slow down your queries or like of any way if the checkpoint takes a while, but it's going to make things faster and improve your querying and improve performance and take up less space on your cluster. All good stuff. This is actually a big one. So shallow clones. Shallow clones is when I say I've got a Delta table and I want to make a copy of it, but I don't want to copy all the data over because I've already got a copy of the data. So when I have a transaction log that points to the original files, and then if I update my shallow clone, only the new files will get created in my new folder. It's a very nice, efficient way of creating copies of data to try and test things out. But I always had this problem of if someone then ran a vacuum on the original table, well, that might invalidate and break my shallow clone. So shallow clones are always just a quick temporary thing until the next time they vacuum, because that's going to break everything for me. That's no longer the case. So running the vacuum on the source of a shallow clone no longer breaks that cloned table if it is in Unity Catalog. So Unity Catalog can be aware that my shallow clone is pointing at another table. It's aware that those Parquet files are used by something else, so it knows not to delete them. So shallow clones only in the context of Unity Catalog are now protected against breaking if you vacuum the source table. But still, super useful, massive, massive improvement. That means that you could actually have shallow clones that are long-lived, rather than, it's a clone, it's going to die in a few days, which is dark and macabre. Yeah. You can now declare your defined functions in Python in SQL, which is, I've not, that's interesting. So you can use them, but you can actually declare them now as well. So actually you can just throw a little bit of Python in there. Why not? So very, very cool. And the fact that you can register them in Unity Catalog, we saw earlier in Unity Catalog, you can now see these functions. So you can actually have these functions inside there. So you go, I'm going to create a function, writing SQL to create a function. Here's what it is. Language, Python, and then just write some Python. Really, really cool. So you can have just an entirely SQL script. You can do it through the Databricks SQL editor, and you can still use Python to define these things, but it's created as there. Again, still be a little bit careful using Python UDFs because performance is always an interesting thing. Generally, you can just get away just use SQL functions. They're going to perform a lot better. Kind of how it works. That'll look uniform for icebergs now in public preview. Again, uniform is one of the big announcements from the Data Summit, where essentially you can make your Delta tables not just provide the Delta transaction log and interface, but also the iceberg and the Hoodie interfaces. So this is saying the iceberg one is going public preview. So if you're currently writing Delta down, turn this on, and then suddenly you'll be able to query those Delta tables using anything that's expecting iceberg, which is cool. Got liquid clustering going into public preview. That is essentially replacing the idea of partitioning and Z ordering with a new approach to essentially sort of managing files in the lake. We're going to do a video about that soon. Very, very cool. Really good for some scenarios. In some cases, maybe not as able to be tuned as a full Z-ordered partition thing, but generally far easier to look after. So cool to look after, cool to see how that works. Various different abilities to say, actually, I want part of my Delta table to go to archive, which is huge. So they're going to save you a ton of money. It's always been a danger. We're going, well, we can't archive it because it's technically part of the Delta table, and someone could write a query wrong and hit that. That's going to be, well, great if it's an archive, but it's going to be really expensive if it's in cold. So more functionality around how that works and actually baking it into the process is great. Really, 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 really great for saving money in your lake costs, which everyone likes that, right? We can now do identifiers. So you can parameterize things inside your SQL statements. So if you want to do what the table name is, the column name is, what the schema name is, just making your SQL more parameter driven without turning it into just a string that you pass into Python. Super, super useful. Really, really good. Again, UC support for functions. Again, we saw that coming in. We've seen those in the updates. And the ability to share schemas through Delta sharing. So rather than have to say, and this table, and this table, and this table, and this table, saying, we'll just take this whole schema and all the tables are inside it and add that to my share. And that means the moment I actually play with things, if I add a table or a view to that schema in future, it's just automatically part of my share. I no longer need to be constantly adding things in and out of my shares. If I had 5 different Delta shares that use the same tables, I can just share the same schema and then just add one table to a schema and add it to all of my shares at once. And that makes life so much easier. So really, really cool to see that going in. So that is now a GA runtime. Now the other runtime, 3.3. Oh, see, that's actually come in recently. So this is still in beta. So actually it's going to keep on moving. So we won't go through it just yet. But that is going to be an LTS. So take a look at the release notes if you're interested. We'll run through it at the end of August and kind of hopefully it's gone GA and we'll see kind of what's actually in there. But be aware, if you're waiting for the long-term support, that LTS runtime, there's one now in beta. So you've been holding off moving to version 13 of the Databricks runtime. Your chance is coming up very, very soon, and that's going to make life a lot easier for people who are having to hop across LTS versions. Oh, cool. Okay. Now, I realize there was a huge amount of information there. That's just basically me shouting a load of features at you. But hopefully there's a few things that stood out going, oh, I didn't know we could do that now. Or, oh, that's coming. Oh, yeah, that'll make life easier. So have a look through the release yourself. I'll put a note down in the description below. Have a look through it. Take the time to digest what's changing in there. Hopefully this gives you a bit of context about what's in there, what's changed, what hasn't changed. And yeah, I'll catch you in the first weeks of September to talk about what's happened in August and how everything fits together. And we'll keep these regular from then on. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.